Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Happiest Hour, where no matter where you are right now, if things are wonderful or if things are challenging, every week we strive to help you make life just a little bit better. My name is Dan Lerner.
And I am Dr. Alan Schlechter.
And together over the past 8 years, we have taught the science of happiness to over 6,000 students at New York University. Now, just last month, while we were teaching our first Zoom class for NYU, Alan and I realized there was actually this wonderful opportunity here. While we teach the work of lots of great researchers and other teachers and scientists, we realized we could actually do something really helpful and meaningful and a lot of fun to share it with a broader audience. So, with the support of the Krame Center for Mindful Living, each week we invite a renowned expert and author to discuss how you might live a more fulfilling life. Now, while many of our experts thus far have focused on topics that we might relate to happiness, this week we get a fella who is going to focus on a real challenge to happiness, and one that we are guessing every one of you is experiencing in some way at this very moment, and that is stress. So, quick question for you, and if you're comfortable doing so, just go ahead and put me or indicate yourself in the chat room. Who here is experiencing stress in some way right now in their lives? Duh. Thank you very much for the duh. That was the perfect start to this response. Duh, me with 7 E's, with 8 E's. Yep. Oh yeah, me. Yeah, a lot of people here are experiencing stress, if not everyone, in some way or another. So thank you for that. And this is perfect. We have never been so thrilled to see so many people be so stressed out. And now we are not thrilled because you are stressed out. We are thrilled because we have just the guy for you. While, as I said, we focused on well-being so far, things like hope and things like meaning, today we're thrilled to welcome someone who's really expert in the other side as well. And that's Dr. Jonathan Fader. Now, we are thrilled not only because he is a licensed clinical and performance psychologist who is well known for working with professional athletes in Major League Baseball, NFL, the Mets, and New York Giants. We're thrilled not only because he's appeared on CNN and ESPN and Good Morning America and CBS This Morning. We're thrilled because Dr. Fader here does what he does with a tremendous amount of heart and passion, as much as I've ever seen in anyone who does anything. He takes his skills beyond the athletic field, and he works with athletes as well as dancers in New York City Ballet. He works with first responders at the New York City Fire Department. He works with folks like us, people who are dealing with stress that comes with simply trying to be our best and live our good lives every day, which is exactly what his book, Life as Sport, covers. And he does it in a way that might come as a surprise. Because it's whether it's the high stakes of pro sports or the day-to-day challenge that we face, it's not just about gritting it out. It's about mindfulness. It's about good communication. It's about well-being. It's about role of thriving on the field and off, on the stage and off, in and out of the office and at home. I think we're most thrilled because we love this guy. I met Fader a few years ago at a conference, and it was like instant. It was like, you're a Jewish Upper West Sider? I'm a Jewish Upper West Sider. You like facial hair? I have facial hair. But most importantly, you work with clients because you absolutely love to help people live great lives? Yeah, you and me both, which is why you need to meet Alan, and which is why he's here today. So it is such an honor to welcome the wonderful brain and heart that is Dr. Jonathan Fader today. Thank you for coming today, Jonathan. Really appreciate you, man.
That it has to be the most heartfelt welcome I've had to any Zoom call today.
Well, you know, I gotta say, it's the best introduction I've given to anyone on any Zoom call today as well. So I'm glad it worked out for us.
I'm pumped to be here, and it's just so great to see all of your faces. Hey, everyone, what's up?
Hey.
Hey, I'm gonna throw this to Jonah. Jonah, here.
Lila and Brian.
I'll throw it back. All right, here we go.
All right, so you know what?
Anna. There you go. Oh, she almost fell over. Hey, John Hearn. Throw it back.
Nana Fran.
Hey, you know what? I'm feeling a little stressed, guys. I gotta admit, I'm a little bit stressed out because, there's a lot of pressure here to perform. So I'm gonna put it back on you for a second. I'm sorry, Dan, can I just ask a question to people?
Man, this is all your show. Why would I start standing in your way?
Well, I'm just curious, because basically what I think about is when I'm talking, you'll remember some weird guy who threw some imaginary ball back and forth. But if you guys talk, you'll remember a lot more. So I'm just curious, because, you know, we've got a whole bunch of people here. But if you could write in the chat box, you know, just one thing that is in the top of your stress list. And, you know, you're going to be tempted to just write like COVID, but like specifically, what's the thing that stresses you right now about what's happening? And also I encourage you to look beyond that. Maybe it's something beyond COVID, but just write in the chat box so we could take a look. You know, what are the things that are on your mind that are kind of building up there? So, okay, cool. Yeah, this is really helpful to see for a couple of reasons. One, because I think there's a benefit in just knowing that we're all experiencing these things together. There's a universality to that, but it's going to be helpful when these guys are asking me their super, super interesting questions in a minute. For us to think about what are the things you guys are actually going through. So Alan, Dan, what are your reactions to all this?
Well, it's so powerful how, as I read, even fixing a broken printer to not enough to do, relationships with family, which is what I talked about as well when I just sent it out, they actually bring an enormous sense of comfort to me. Again, that feeling of connectedness to everyone. When we were speaking before the call, I think a central idea for me today, because everyone, just to know, I woke up today and I just was like, blah. It was just a blah wake up day. And I went to sleep happy, but then I woke up and it's been one too many days of this, and it felt like my work was never ending, and I feel bad about my kids. And I started really focusing on my stress. I decided that I had to get rid of my stress today. I just had to do things to get rid of my stress. But then actually I had an encounter with a family, a patient that I work with, a 10-year-old kid who's doing better in the midst of all of this. That's what made me feel happier, the connectedness. And so one of the things, Jonathan, I'd love you to talk about today is the idea that sometimes it's not about focusing on our stress to get rid of our stress, which was a huge mistake of all of my early life. I wanted to live a stress-free life, and that was a big mistake because I went to medical school. And
no stress there.
Yeah, no, I literally thought, oh, once I get to medical school, I won't be stressed, and because I was a moron. And
you're one of the smartest morons I've ever met. You're like, you're really doing a good show for morons.
Well,
he's a really good moron.
Here I am, 44 years later, and I woke up this morning and I was like, I just have to get rid of my stress and I'll feel better. And
yeah, well, I love what you're saying here. And actually, just so everybody knows, you know, we were talking about what we might talk about on this call. And one of the things Alan said is like, should we even ask people what they're stressed about? Which I thought was a really fair and interesting question, right? Do we ask people to go there mentally? And where we came out on that was we sort of landed that it would be helpful for people to see we're all in this together. But the other thing I think about this is that generally we have you know, two responses to stress or threat. Typically we get paralyzed, or we try to kind of like push it away. We try to push away the stress. And so I think what's really helpful is the way I think about it as humans, there's kind of three things that we do as humans. This is a simplification. So sorry for all the philosophy. I saw some people are studying there. So for the philosophy majors, I'm really sorry. But humans think, feel, and act. We think, we feel, and we act. And in my experience, with stress comes, we spend a lot of time feeling and thinking, rather than really focusing on what we can do. What I say to athletes and firefighters and everybody is, you can't think your way out of stress. You can only do your way, usually, out of stress. And so that's really what my focus is for myself as well. When I experience stress, when I think about anything from fixing a printer, which is, I love that on there because, you know, stress is so relative, to helping someone who's really sort of at the last juncture of wanting to live or not, right? That you know, spectrum. So yeah, I think it's all about finding ways to do your way out of stress and not think your way out of stress.
So, given that, it's so interesting who you've worked with really runs the gamut. I mean, the kind of the titles, Mets, Giants, pop off the page, New York City Ballet, New York City Fire Department. And then you reference, how do you do stress, right? So I'd be really curious to know, and the book, like the sport, takes so much of what you've learned and observed working with athletes, and you bring it to us who are not on a field in front of 50,000 people. Not that anyone is right now, but can you talk a little bit about that? What did you see there that you bring to your everyday?
Yeah,
and what did you see there that folks can relate to? Yeah.
Well, I'll just think about the things that stress me out. I mean, so first of all, I like the title that you guys came up with, is Making Stress Your Friend. Stress is my friend, in the sense that, I like the Steph Curry, the basketball player. He said, basically, I don't get bothered by butterflies anymore. It's just letting me know I'm getting ready to perform. And, the idea is that for me, when I feel what people call anxiety, which to me is future-oriented worry and physiological arousal, meaning anxiety are two things. One, something I feel in my body, like my heart, my gut, and worry about something in the future generally that I cannot control, that I don't wait to see how I'm going to react to it. I've taught myself, learned responses to those things. So in other words, the famous Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? We all get punched in the face in our life constantly. Sometimes we get punched in the face by our physical health. Sometimes we get punched in the face by some nature, is what's happening now.
Just to be clear, my younger daughter punched my older daughter in the face.
Sometimes it's your sister who
right.
punches you in the face.
Yeah.
Hopefully not for all of you guys, but that definitely does happen. So the idea, Dan, is, I'll say specifically what I do, because I really want to have people to walk away with concrete things. What I do is this. So I'm just thinking about, I think something that I wouldn't say stresses me out, but activates me, is public speaking, like what I'm doing now, right? And, to me, funnily enough, it's actually sometimes smaller groups that activate stress or that physiological arousal. Like a large group, 1,000 people, it's this anonymous. But sometimes when you're sitting there and you can see people, and people go, like, as you're talking, or even worse for a speaker, like the absolute death marches.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So when you see that, you feel thoughts and physical feelings that lead to stress or associated with stress. So for me, what I do for athletes and high performers and everyone is to help them develop what I call macro routines and micro routines. I believe that everybody should be training their mind-body connection every day in some form. And the ones that people usually do, if they're doing it, are things like mindfulness, having a gratitude practice, things like that. So in the macro sense, I think a lot of people are doing something like that. But as far as like making anxiety or stress your friend, I believe also people need micro routines, things they're doing in the moment that are pre-planned for when things come their way, they know how they're going to respond to it. So for me, for example, I have certain things I say to myself. So I love the Billie Jean King quote, "Pressure is a privilege." And that's what I say to myself in moments where I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed. I actually say to myself, pressure is a privilege. And the other thing I do actually is there's some research to say that saying your own name is helpful when you speak to yourself. So in other words, not saying to yourself like, oh, I can do it, like that's ridiculous. But if I just say to myself, okay, Fader, this next chapter. Okay, Fader, this talk. Okay, Fader, talk to Alan. That kind of self-coaching can be really helpful in moments of stress. And some of the thinking about that, Alan, is, if you say it like, oh, I can do it, your mind's not going to believe it. But if you use the third person, it's more objective.
Huh.
So those are some of the things I do day to day. And the other thing I do is I just remind myself to enjoy it. Before we get on this call, I was just like, hey, have fun with this. And so those, I think, can be really proactive things that people can build into their routines.
Jonathan, I love what you say. It connects. For years, I'm a little brother, and I'm like a consummate little brother.
I bet you got punched in the face.
Actually,
By his sister.
I don't know if my sister punched me in the face, but my younger daughter is Mike Tyson. But I would feel left out often in life. Like I could be invited to 9 things, but if I don't get invited at 10th, I'd be like, ugh. And I started
Just out of
doing
curiosity, just do me a favor. If you have felt left out in the past, 6 months, raise your hand or put me too in the chat box if that's happened to you. Okay, let's go back further. 10 years. Have you felt left out? Okay. And the reason I ask is because, I think one of the things to manage stress is, again, back to the universality. We think we're the only person going through these things. But it turns out that almost every single thing that you could be experiencing right now, there's thousands of people right now who are experiencing it. And so I think that's helpful because we have this story we tell ourselves that we're the only person who feels left out. We're the only person who's got punched in the face. We're the only person that's experiencing this. And I think that moving towards universality helps with stress a great deal. That's why group therapy helps for sure. But you don't even have to, it could just be about just knowing.
Well, that's it, right? John Hearn just brought up just Misery Love Company, though. And, one of the very first class of the semester, as students who are here, and I see a couple of them can vouch for, we show some data on stress in college students, that 90% of college students feel overwhelming stress each and every year in college. And we ask the students, who here's been stressed out? 500 students in the room. Almost every one of them raises their hand, right? And good, keep them up. Now look around. And you can see the eyes open. They're like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one, or I thought I was one of very few. And now that I realize there's so many, I think, to answer John's question, also to address what you're just saying right now, is the idea of, if we're all heading through this, maybe there's a solution that we can all address and we can do it together. We feel supported, even though we're miserable, right? We feel supported in a way that we can work together. We can do this together. And I think that's partially it. So your question at the beginning, what's stressing people out? It might not have been fixing a printer for some people, but it was for others. It might not have been graduate school for some people, but it was for others. And if you see that one or two other people out there, you're not the only one. And we have this tendency to think, I am the only one.
No doubt. But, stress, as you're saying, Dan, stress is so relative. For those of you that, this is a spoiler for those of you who haven't seen my TEDx talk, but one of the things I've done with sports teams is that I'll bring in this bingo jar. It's like a ball, and it has all these numbers in it. And I'll say to the team, okay, we're going to pick a number at random out of this ball. And that number corresponds to your jersey number. So everybody's looking at each other, okay, like thinking then we're going to win a prize or something like that. And I pull it out, I say, the person who actually I pick is going to come up in front of the whole team and freestyle rap battle with me. Everybody, quickly is like trying to assess where the nearest emergency exit is, right? Usually there's this groan of fear that comes up. And so back to what I was saying before, what I'm doing there is, actually even just saying what I said to you, and this sometimes happens to me, I felt physiologically aroused. And just so you know, what Dan and Alan have decided that we're going to ask someone to unmute their video and to do a little freestyle rapping with us. So who was it that you were going to pick, Dan? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. But I saw a whole bunch of people and their little,
Don't go anywhere. All of a sudden we have like 13 people on the call.
Yeah, we went from like 100 to like 2 people. So everybody, a bunch of people actually just went like this. No way. And if you think about no way, why not, right? Because it's stressful. Fundamentally, stress or physiological arousal, or however we talk about it, the experience that we have is evolutionary. It's there to protect us. It's there because, we are able to have further generations from running away from stuff. So all that is really natural. But what I was going to tell you about this story is I bring in FDNY firefighters to talk to football teams, and I bring in Navy SEALs to talk to baseball teams. And what's really interesting is that the SEALs will actually say, and the firefighters will say, I can never do what you do. Mm-hmm. And I first thought that they were thinking about, like these feats of athleticism. But they were really talking about is it would kill them to have to perform in front of 80,000 people. In fact, we actually put a heart rate monitor on one of the most elite rescue firefighters from the FDNY. And when he talked to the team, his heart rate was higher than it was ever in the most brutal, deadly fire. So when you think about printers and you think about, you know, health risk or COVID, it really depends. You know, stress is in the eye of the beholder, which means that you can do a lot of work in modifying your story and your response to your physiology through mindfulness, through breath work, through gratitude, through in the moment micro corrections, through adapting a growth mindset. These kind of tools are tools that help us to change the filter we have on our stress.
Jonathan, two things. So first, you have finally helped me understand that as the little brother, the thing I finally developed for myself was I would tap myself on the shoulder and I would say, it's okay, little brother, you can go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I always thought it was the tap on the shoulder, but it might have been me naming myself. Number two, you know, you brought up stress is perceived. And I think about, you know, in this modern world, our stress, I'd say more often than not, is not life-threatening, that we become really caught up with. But in this moment, the stress can be life-threatening. And I wonder if that is different and the ability to react to it is different. I mean, most of the time when I'm talking with patients, I'm able to say, so if you fail this class, your world won't really end, and somehow we'll be able to get to the end of it.
Right.
But
What's the worst that can happen is a very different question now.
That's right.
It was 2 months ago.
How does that change the conversation in your head and in other people's heads?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that's different, there's a couple things I think about that. One, I just think about the work I've done with like corporations and companies about psychological safety. And the idea that basically, so Google did this study where they were looking at what makes a great team. I'm going to circle back, Alan, I promise.
I got it.
But you know, the study revealed basically that the idea of psychological safety, meaning I feel that I could say what I want to say without being criticized, leads to exceptional teams. And where there was fear of not being safe, that it didn't work so well. And when I talk to, you know, people in teams, what I talk a lot about is this idea that when we're criticized, we actually are activated in a way that our brain is sort of similar or shades of the sense of that we're in physical danger. So back to your question, I actually think that there sometimes, you know, the difference in terms of our cortisol levels and stress is not that different if someone says, you know, you're full of it and your work sucks and, you know, you just totally phoned it in on this project. What we experience as a person could be very different. It could be very similar to watching CNN and realizing that there's been a spike in deaths in our neighborhood, right? The difference is in what you're talking about is that there's more of a threat, obviously, to our physical health now as a result of this virus. But the rules of engagement in our lives remain the same for me. High performance under stress there's one fundamental rule that is critical and that it always exists, which is the idea of identifying in our lives what we control. And my experience has been that the people that are able to function the best under pressure and stress are the ones that have a clear sense of what they control in any environment. And the people that really get overwhelmed by stress are the ones that ruminate and sit, because we always talk about fight or flight. That's not really an accurate representation of what happens when we're afraid for our lives. It's really fight, flight, and freeze. And what most people do who are having a lot of struggle is they freeze. Flight is okay, actually. Flight's not so bad. You end up having grandchildren if you flight. And sometimes you have grandchildren if you fight, but you never have grandchildren if you freeze. You just don't. And so back to your question, I think really what people can do day to day when they find themselves being overwhelmed by the printer or COVID is to say, wait a second, what do I control? Like, what is the thing right now that I can do differently? Oftentimes, the answer is nothing, right? But that learning process, what I actually ask myself when I get stressed about something is there any new information? That's what I ask myself. Is there any new information? And if there is, then I act on it. And if there isn't, I'm going back to some of those techniques I was talking about before. We actually have an acronym that we use in sports called APE, which is to remind us of what we can control in athletics. And we've actually, it's pretty portable. I think it works for everything from parenting to your HP or your Epson. Basically,
is that A? Sorry, is that APE, Jonathan? What is that?
APE, yeah.
And yeah.
You always control your attitude. That no one can tell you how to think about something. We always control how we think about something. Unless some of you are living in some sci-fi universe I don't know about, you should let me know that. You can chat me. Let me know if you're in a sci-fi universe I don't know about, and we'll follow up with you afterwards. But most of us can control our attitude. You can't control your thought, but you can control your response to your thought. You can never control your thought, but you can control how you respond to your thought. The philosophy people here, we can argue about what's a behavior and what's a thought afterwards. But anyway, you can't control your thoughts. So your attitude is one. P is your preparation. What do you do every day proactively for your mental health and well-being? What are we doing every day? For me, I'm really lucky. I grew up with a mom who meditated, so I sort of always did it. And now I meditate in the morning, and then I also do some mindfulness with my mom later in the evening, which is like a really nice routine. And I've done that on purpose because right now there's more stress on me. Funny enough, my parents actually, their printer broke, and they somehow ended up on the phone with Verizon, and they fixed the printer, but then it took their internet offline. So whoever's printer's there, we can do like an offline support group. So P is your preparation. What are you doing every day for your health and well-being? Like and not just your health, but your mentality. Like, do you have a gratitude practice? As I said before, do you have mindfulness? Are you asking yourself, like, what am I enjoying right now? Like, I'm just looking at all these faces, especially adorable, or like there's a couple couples or just a couple people together. And so there's so many delicious moments in this fucked up, oops, am I allowed to say that?
Cut him off. Do we have a censor? We can't have a censor.
Oh,
Sorry,
God.
Earmuffs.
For all the kids out there, I'm really sorry.
My mother-in-law is on this call.
I think my mom's on this call too.
Are your daughters on this call, Jonathan? Come on.
Yeah, my daughters and my grandkids. So there's so many delicious moments in this terrible time. And asking ourselves, like, what is the delicious moment today? If there's this other in surfing and snowboarding and motorcycle riding, there's this phenomenon where if you want to turn, one of the things that you're doing is you're looking where you want to go, right? So when you look to a place you want to go, what happens is that your shoulders turn, your body turns, and it kind of like naturally moves your body into the wave or down the mountain, or taking a turn on a bike or a motorcycle. You can't just jack it like that. And so I believe that where you put your focus, what you pay attention to, is what you begin to see more. And so when you think about this, like, are you looking for one delicious moment a day, right? Like, are you saying to your friend, your cat, hey cat, this is a delicious moment that I just found, right? Like, I'm working with this actor who has this incredible house, and his house, get this, can record moments. You can just say to your house, record this moment, and it'll capture all the sound and light settings so you can recreate it. How about that, right? Talk about a new science fiction world. So what are you doing in your own mind to capture the moment? What can you say? What can you do? Dear diary, this was a delicious moment today. Because that is a form of preparation. And the last thing is effort. Effort is a complicated one, but it just generally means, can I reach down a little bit deeper? And I'm not talking about like one more rep on the bench press here, but on this call, can I give you guys 5% more, right? Like, I'm going to give whatever percent, but could I give 5% more? If I'm listening to my loved one, can I give, a little bit more attention right now? Can I muster up, 1% more love for this person on this call? Right, that's effort. And so these are the things that we control: attitude, preparation, effort. And I think that that's really helpful when you're worried about, this unseen virus, is to bring ourselves back to the idea of, these are the things that I am in control of.
Well, it's interesting, those things, that's such a brilliant way to think through it and be able to remember it. And I can totally see how it works with, like you said, whether you're on the field or you're a parent. So much of it brings us back to mindfulness in a lot of ways. What am I focusing on right now? And there are a couple of questions before. If you're in a sports situation, or if you fall and not make the cut, or if you don't get the job, if you're interviewing, whatever it might be, how do you train your brain for that kind of pressure? And also, how do you deal with stress that already happened? So, so it seems to me that what we're saying here in the APE, in terms of mindfulness, is what are you focused on right now? Goes back to William James too. Like, what am I focused my attention on? One of the simplest things that I remember studying in sports psychology was you have to have a long memory for good things and a short memory for the failures, right? That happened. I struck out next, right? And so, but I'm going to take, when I hit that ball, what did I do? Freeze this moment. If I had the house, right? Where was I? What did it feel like? What was I doing? What was I in control of too? Which is what you have control of. So when you're a parent, especially right now, I found, there are moments where I'm like, I'm caught under the same roof in a New York apartment with my family. And then what I found has been really helpful is looking at my son, who might be frustrating me at the moment, and thinking, man, I love that boy so much. Even though he's pissing me off right now. Like, there's something I find I love about him. Or I'm frustrated with something else. I'll look at him and I'll be like, I'm really glad that he's here. I have time with him. Or when I'm engaged with him, I'm really going to focus on this Lego. I want to know what you're telling me. Just up 2%. And it makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. I mean, one of the strategies that we teach coaches, it comes from this technique that I wrote about, called motivational interviewing. And one of the things that's super powerful is the idea of giving people affirmations. And I think that idea of an affirmation can be really helpful. What affirmation is, and you pointed it out too, is saying to someone something really positive that you observed them saying, doing, or acting. Right. And as I always tell people, you have to be really careful when doing this, because an affirmation said in the wrong way can actually activate, I don't want to get too science-based here and neurological, but it can activate a part of your brain that makes affirmation not accessible for the person. And that area of activation is called the BS meter. If the person perceives your affirmation as being BS, it doesn't land. So right. One of the things I do day to day for my kids, I try to with my wife, with my parents, with my friends, is to think about things that are impressive, or that I think they're doing well, and find really credible ways to let them know, right? Really credible ways to be able to talk about it. Like, I think, one of the things that's incredible about you two is it's really hard to get one college student to go to one class. Somehow you guys get 500 college students to come to a class about, essentially thinking and feeling, which to me, I think maybe you could point to the content, but it's got to be the way that you guys really show love and passion in the way that you're interacting with people. Mm-hmm. So an affirmation has to be based on something observable, right? I'm just giving you guys I'm pointing out facts. You can't say, no, actually it was $4.99. I mean, maybe you could, but I'm pointing out facts about what you're doing. And by that, not only do you guys hopefully feel good, but I feel good, because I've just guided my brain towards something. And so when you think about stress, to your point, Alan, it's not only about saying like, oh, let's say I have back pain, right? It's not about focusing on the back pain. It's about strengthening the muscles around that, right? Doing the things that are going to make us feel that there is strength and vibrancy in our life. And so thinking about affirmation is a way that brings me a lot. I get a lot of joy about affirming Uber drivers. Finding things that people are doing in day-to-day life that make me feel good for pointing out that there's good in them.
It's really interesting. I just got to point out that one of the techniques that Alan and I teach in the course, by the way, just say thank you, by the way, that was beautiful. And thank you for sharing that with us. Dan,
can I just ask one question?
Please.
How many people here have been to that class? Like how many, if you've been raised in your chat box, say me. Yeah, like what class do you
Hey,
take?
buddy.
What class? Sorry, guys, I'm just loving up on these guys for one more second. What class do you take that you go on a webinar to learn more from those people? That's never happens, right? It just never happens. So that was affirmation part 2.
I'm calling it right now.
Technically, their being here is extra credit, but I'm glad they're here anyway. This is summer school. No. Hi, everybody.
All right, take that back, guys. Hold on.
No. So wonderful. Yeah, these names, these wonderful faces. It's
Katie.
Yeah. Take it back. So it's one of the things you bring up. It's so interesting. I don't know if we've touched on something like this, but something that we do teach in the class is called active constructive responding. And active constructive responding is for good news. When someone shares good news with you, often, you say, hey, I just got for a college student, just got a great internship at Google, right? And someone turns around and goes, oh, that sounds really hard, man. Aren't you working like all summer long? You won't have a summer at all. It doesn't exactly enhance your good news. And there are lots of ways to come at it. There's one way that's really productive. It's called active constructive responding, which I imagine you're familiar with. Someone shares good news and you ask them questions. It's like motivational interviewing. Tell me more about that. What did it feel like when you got that? What are you looking forward to most? They relive the experience. And the research shows that the relationships we have over the course of a month become much more trusting, much more intimate, that we enjoy the experience of that conversation almost as much, if not more, than the experience itself. What you're proposing skips the I have to wait for good news to respond to, and you respond anyway. To say, I really love what it is that you're doing. I love that. I love the passion
Totally.
you're showing. I love that. I love when I see someone on a camera here, on one of the faces here, happen to have Helene and Hannah right next to each other. Like they're here with us. Like it's so awesome to see. And you, B. Sternfeld, by the way, who's also right next to them. I'm like, oh, you're here with us. It's such a wonderful. Thank you for being so present. And those are things that why not say them? Because
I'll tell you why not.
Yeah.
Because it makes us uncomfortable. Like it feels weird to do that. It's a stretch. You know what I mean? It's a stretch to do that. And I think, we as we operate how we learned. Many people didn't grow up in families where people were saying this to each other. And so it's uncomfortable. You got to kind of lean into it. Sure. And, I think, what you said is really crucial here. It's about, putting on what, my collaborator, Steve Rolnick, who came up with motivational interviewing, says are strength-based lenses, putting on strength-based lenses for people. We tend to see what's wrong. It's human nature to see what's wrong. Like we survive because we saw what's wrong. You could survive in the tundra 30,000 years ago. You can definitely go without food. How long can you go without food? Go right in the chat box. How long can humans go without food? Take a guess. We got 2 weeks, 7 days, 3 weeks, 15 minutes. Yeah, John Hearn. Look out for John Hearn. Dangerous man, that John Hearn.
Oh, I know John Hearn. He's a big man with a big appetite.
Or yeah, it depends, but it's typically around 3 weeks that you can go without food. How long can you go without water? Go ahead and write it down in there. We got 3 days, 4 days, 1 day, 3 days, 2 days, a week. Hold on one second. It's actually about 3 days. You go without water. How long can you go without air? There's a pattern evolving. That's a clue. Yeah, 3 minutes. So, how long can you last if you fail to recognize a lethal predator in your immediate environment? Go ahead and write that in there. Not long, all right? Not long. So what does this do to the human's brain and evolution? It makes us notice the bad stuff. It makes us notice what's dangerous to us, because that's really essential. It was always essential to notice what's dangerous. You can deal with the bunny later. You can hunt that bunny later, but you have to be always activated to know that person who's talking about you behind your back. You always got to know who's gossiping about you, right? You always got to know, if I go into this room here with everybody, and I got a whole bunch of people that are like, and I got one person, just one, who's like, I'm definitely going to notice them first. No question, I'm going to notice that person first. We notice what's wrong. And so back to the affirmation and back to the things we're talking about, we're really, in some ways, in my mind, fighting back against some of our natural ways as humans to do the things we're talking about, which would make it difficult. It makes it difficult to do that. And so, but that doesn't mean that it isn't really what we're supposed to, or what's going to lead to to the happiest hour.
Jonathan, somebody asked a question that I think I can say I've thought about many a time, that Spock-like dream. They said, why can't we control our thoughts? What is it about our brains that we can't control our thoughts? And I sort of have my way of answering, but I'd be really
Actually, no,
curious.
You start. I want to hear you on this one, and then I'll chime in. Because I think it seems like, look, by your reputation and your amazing art, I feel like there's going to be a brewing of a really good concept here. I want to hear it.
Wow. God, no, that's put me a lot. I think the answer I often give, boy, no pressure, is that we are of multiple minds within our brain. And that we do, up here, we've got this frontal part of the brain, and it acts somewhat consciously. And we get to control our thoughts and ponder why we're here and why we exist a little bit. But the majority of our brain comes from our mammalian past. And this is what I usually just call it the limbic part of the brain. But I say, most of our brain is out of our control, and it's filled with the automatic thoughts and our gut and our values. And in a very famous quote from the times of George W. Bush, values trump data for most of us. That what we really feel within us will often push against what we know. But I also add sometimes that the fact that we can't control our brains is also a wonderful thing. It lets us think up crazy new ideas and imagine things that we go, where did that come from? And I have to assume anybody on this call who's an artist is tapping into that part of your brain quite a lot. So there are some downsides to not being able to control our thoughts, but I also like to elevate the upsides.
Yeah, all right. I love that. What I love about that is what the part you're saying about having a reappraisal of that. Like, let's say we agree we can't control our thoughts. The next thought could be, and that sucks, and that's terrible, and we're tortured by them. Or the thought could be like, well, huge upside is that we have creativity, and we have, evolution, right? And evolution of thought. So I think that's a wonderful reframe of that. And I agree with you. One of the ways that I talk to sports teams about it is I always talk about, what kind of animal is the human animal? How are we different? So go ahead and write in the chat box, how are humans, in your mind, how are we different as humans? And when you think about, for example, stress, how are we different from other animals? Like, let's say, how do we stress differently than other animals?
Yes, we do ruminate.
Yeah, to me, the ruminate, and also we think a lot about the future. That's legit. Yeah, we think about the future. The thing that made humans survive, by the way, one of the other aspects of humans, I would say, to me, and it'd be interesting to hear what you guys think, what made humans survive are a few things. One, collaboration, the ability to collaborate. One human against a beast, the beast wins. 3 humans against a beast, humans every day. But the other aspect is that we can think, oh, if I do that, then this will happen. Or, you know what, I did that last time. Now, there's certain animals that have some of those capabilities, but there's no animal that competes. But on the liability side, we have so many thoughts. I guarantee you that everybody here, when I asked them a question, got in their head a little bit and said, should I say that? Do I know the answer? Should I say 3 minutes? I'm not sure. Should I write something in the chat box? We're always in our heads about ourselves and our experiences. And so I think more, like, when I think about it, it's more just learning to, rather than controlling our thoughts, it's accepting the nature of what it is to be a human. That is, Alan, you're talking about, we have this old brain that has built upon it. And, when we experience stress, we're actually kind of going back to our old brain. Like we're remembering. Actually, it's funny, when I say to people to say to themselves, actually, once I've explained some of the things I talked about, one of the self-talk statements I have people say when they feel physiological arousal or worry is to say, "Oh, hello, old friend." And, sort of a weird evolutionary joke. It's probably the nerdiest self-statement, but you're really talking to this ancient woman or man or person that's inside of you, that's been there for generations and generations, right? It's not you. That's like the old version of you. And so to be able to know that in these moments can really be helpful to say, like, oh, wait, this is the nature of being a human being.
I just to mention, one thing that came to mind first was, I think the first book I ever read that was associated with sports psychology was The Inner Game of Tennis. And Tim Galway mentions there's basically you and you number one, you number two. You number one is serving the ball. You number two is going, I can't believe you just served that ball into the net. You number one is like, wait, I didn't mean to. And you number two is like, I can't believe, right? And last week,
the doer, and the thinker.
Yeah. Last week I was walking the park with Julian, my son, and we had a sort of a challenging moment the evening before. He was challenged by something that was happening, and he was really out of sorts, and it was really couldn't get him back on track, and he was upset. We get upset, but we were walking the park, and I said, what happened there? Because I knew that he wanted to. Basically, he was sort of lost his temper, and it was clear, like the pathway back to being okay with the evening was like, all you need to do is let's just make it up. We need to apologize. You apologize, we can get right back on track. And he's like, not gonna happen. Right. So walking the park the next morning with the dogs, I said, what was happening yesterday? Like, what's going through your mind? And he goes, it was like I had like a good Julian over here and like a bad Julian over here. And good Julian is like, just do it. And bad Julian is like, you're not going to do it. I'm not going to let you do it. And there are these two competing Julians. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. But I bring it up because he's 12, and even when that young, we can recognize, there was part of me that was saying something I didn't want to hear. And there was part of me that's saying the right thing. And it might be a bit more mature, at least for us now. We can identify and think about it differently. But that sparked a conversation to go, all right, so what do you think we should do about Julian number two next time? We named him something different. We were able to talk about it. And even when it happened next time, to go, let's talk about Julian number two for a second. Didn't make it that much easier, but it made it a little easier to be able to identify it and separate them.
It's so funny to hear that, man. It's such a beautiful story. And it also, again, going back to like, bearded guys from the Upper West Side, I have a similar thing with my younger daughter, which is good wolf and bad wolf. So I think naming that and having we learn and we think in stories. So having a shortcut in that moment can help us to, manage stress. I mean, it's funny, we're on this animal tip. I mean, the other thing I think about is like, who here has a dog or has ever had a dog?
Two of them.
Yeah. So, like what I think about is like dogs are amazing. They get into fights. Like I've seen my dog be like nearly mortally wounded. And then 10 seconds later is like, where's the pizza? Like humans, we're so stuck on what's happened in the past and the future. And I think a lot of the techniques that we're talking about are just helping us to get back into the present. My favorite quote of all time probably is the Dalai Lama quote. There are only 2 days in the year in which nothing can be done. It's a riddle. Only 2 days in the year in which nothing can be done. One is called yesterday, and the other is called tomorrow. Right? And so I think a lot of the things are getting back to the good part of being an animal, right? Which is just being in the present moment. My dog, my dog is an amazing, he's an expert at being in the moment. The other day we walked him and he was pooping and simultaneously eating pizza off the street. If that's not being centered in the present moment, I don't know what is.
I've done it. I've done it. I just want, I'm not competitive with your dog.
I feel like you're kind of trying to encroach on his territory here, man.
Been there.
Oh man.
So I'm curious, we've been talking a lot about these different things in sports and firefighting. I'm actually curious about you guys. We have like 100 folks here who are, experiencing all these different challenges as someone pointed out, we do have a sort of a predator out there. I'm curious about questions that you guys have, for Dan, for me, for Alan, about management of stress. And
Jonathan,
about also your reactions to what we've been talking about so far. I'm really curious to hear what people are. I find that for me, responding in real time to the real things that people are going through is challenging. Oh, my dog's name is Lucky Quince Marquez Fader III. There was never 2 or 1, but my daughter wanted to name him all these names. And so when it got time for me to add a name, I felt like another name was too much. So I just said, let's call him the third. So Lucky Marquez Quince. Lucky
Jonathan,
Quince.
one of the questions that's been coming through, and it was when we asked about being stressed, and it's what is stressing me the most is say my worry about my kids and my wife, and my mom, is it different? A lot of people said they're stressed because they're worrying about other people. And is it different when the stress is not about yourself, in a way, when it is about someone else, and which is so hard to control? I wonder if there's a special category for the stress of worrying for others.
I mean, well, I'll just talk from my own experience that, I'm stressed for my mom. She's 84, has been battling cancer for 5 years. If you saw me taking her to the doctor, it basically looks like a cross between Mad Max, if anyone has ever seen that movie, and like Sesame Street.
The new one or the old one?
Oh, the old one. The
Okay.
old one. Yeah. Like I'm Tina Turner and my mom's Mel Gibson, and my mom wears, like, I have her wear my snowboarding goggles, because we didn't get early on the face shield situation. So, I think actually going back to, and I'm just looking at some of the questions here about like what specific mindfulness meditation techniques do you suggest to manage during this time? I actually think that it's not necessarily about the techniques. It's how good you can get at remembering them in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not really about the specificity of the technique. It's how can you reduce the time between the trigger and what you do, right? So what people do is they overload themselves with techniques, like you're reading books and books and techniques, but it doesn't really matter. I actually think if you can just practice getting back to your breath, identifying that you're feeling dysregulated, and getting back to your breath, to a focus on your breath in those moments, you will learn, your body will learn, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to just ruminate on this thing. I'm actually supposed to get back into my body, like, for a second. So like, here, we'll just do something right now. So right now, everybody just take your hand, put it on your chest, and just in your mind, just say, in this moment, I'm safe and okay. If it helps, even just close your eyes. And then just go ahead and like send yourself that sense of safety, right? In this moment, I'm safe and okay. So open your eyes. I mean, that's just a shift. I'll tell you another one. Go ahead right now and think about, right, someone in your life. Just think about them. Someone in your life who brings you joy. Just think about that person, like bring their face to mind, or some pet, right, that brings you joy. These are like micro routines that it's not about which technique you use. I'll give you another one. We know that a human at rest breathes about 10-second full inhalation exhalations. Between like 3 and 5 second inhalation, 3 or 5 second exhalation. So we'll all do it together. On the count of 3, we'll start. 1, 2, 3. Inhale, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Exhale, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Pause. Inhale, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. Exhale. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Pause. Go ahead and write what you were thinking about during that, 15-second time. Go ahead, write what you were thinking about in the chat box. Nothing. Nothing. Breathing. Breathing, nothing. Longest 5 seconds of my life. Why are my shoulders so high? Whether I should turn off my camera. Right. So many people were able to just be with their breath. And for those of you that's sort of like, and I'm sure the Krame Center has many resources for people that are, trying to get more in depth about this. But basically, the idea here is that by practicing this, here's the other thing about this. Sorry, I'll stop talking in 1 second, I promise. Here's the other thing about this. No one goes to the gym, does 5 minutes of curls, and then looks at their muscle and says, why, I mean, I do this. Why didn't it grow? No one goes on the elliptical machine for 20 minutes and then goes on the scale and then demands that we hope it, but we know that's unrealistic. It's the same thing with a mental adjustment. The act of mental conditioning, which is what we call it in sports, mental conditioning is the idea that it takes routine practice. So back to the techniques. I mean, I gave you, 4 or 5 different things you could do. It doesn't matter. The idea is how quickly, when you notice that you're dysregulated, that you're offended, that you feel bad, that you're lonely, that your printer doesn't work, do you catch yourself and you build that self-awareness to shift course, just like Julian did, right? And say, I'm going with Julian number 2 right now, right? Here's how I do my way out of the situation.
That was wonderful, Jonathan. I'm stealing that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a gift.
You've given it to us all. Oh my God!
Take it.
I just said
Take
that.
it.
Yeah.
Resell it. Resell it on. Put it on some fancy stuff and sell it on what do you call it? Where they sell all the stuff, the handmade stuff. Help me out, someone.
Oh, Etsy.
Thank you so much, Etsy. Put it on. Spray paint it on something and sell it.
Speaking of which, by the way, where can folks find? I mean, you had just so many wonderful pearls of wisdom, and both just thoughts and ideas, and how it all works upstairs, how we can process things we can do. Where can people find more of you? Because I'm sure
I'm reaching behind my computer. Hold on.
What's that?
I'm reaching behind my computer. This is where it all lives. Here's my book, Life is Sport.
Awesome.
It is a book about how you take the same techniques that high-performing athletes use and use them in your life.
Right.
Use them in your marriage, use them in your relationship, use them as a parent, use them as a business person, as a student. How can you use things like imagery, self-talk, enjoyment, gratitude, all these things that high performers in these settings use, people in FTNY, breathing techniques, and implement them in your own life.
Perfect. All right. Life is Sport, Jonathan Fair. That's fantastic. It's funny. Someone had written just a few minutes ago, don't stop talking. I'm learning a lot. And I saw the timestamp, which is 5:56. And I was like, no, because we have to make him stop talking, which we don't want to do. Otherwise, it wouldn't officially be the happiest hour. Before we go, before we say goodbye, anything like that, before we get the sign off, just want to remind folks, next week, a lot of the questions today, which unfortunately we couldn't get to, were about the neuroscience of everything. What is happening? And, Alan touched on it. Jonathan touched on it. We have Heather Berlin next week, who's a neuroscientist and professor of psychiatry.
She's awesome.
She is truly awesome.
Truly,
is,
really
right?
awesome.
Yeah, she is.
As is her husband, Baba Brinkman.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, totally. He actually does freestyle rap. That's him, right? I actually saw his show, not knowing he was married. He does this freestyle rap show about the rap history of evolution and the rap history of religion. It's hilarious and amazing. Maybe we can get him on. Maybe we can join her next week.
Oh my God!
I have a sense they're probably going to be in the same place at the same time. I don't know why.
I'm logging in.
So I mean, she's going to be here, and she's also amazing. She's amazing in so many ways, including she's done a lot of work on TV. In addition to being this brilliant neuroscientist, she explains science so beautifully, breaks it down so simply, and so wonderfully and usefully. So we get her next week. So you stick around after the show. right after the show, we'll have an information image on the screen about Heather and the show. You can also go to happiesthour.org, www.happiesthour.org. We'll have information on Heather and registering the whole thing. So what you'll also find there is a link to No Kid Hungry. As you may remember, these are all free, and we're so thrilled to bring them to you. If you'd like to give, we're affiliated with No Kid Hungry, a not-for-profit that feeds less fortunate kids, especially important right now. So with that, let me say thank you for an amazing hour, Jonathan. Like,
Hey,
it flew by like that, you know?
it really went by fast. And, I think it also went by just because everybody was chiming in and getting in the chat box. I know it's a lot of effort to go back to the ape thing, but appreciate people chiming in and talking. And Alan, Dan, it's such a great opportunity. I mean, for me, this is just fun to talk to you guys. It's so great what you're doing. And I feel happier after this hour. So thank you.
Well, as do we. I think we all feel a little less stressed too, and it's a major accomplishment. So listen. So thank you again for joining us, all of you, at the Happiest Hour Live. Where no matter where you are right now, if things are wonderful, if things are challenging, each week we strive to make life a little bit better. Have a happier week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you.
Be well and be safe.